My name is Lynne Farren. My medium is mixed medium, which means a multitude of things. When I make art, I use a lot of found objects, found materials. So anything could be turned into art. I love thrift stores, or maybe a flea market, or anywhere I can find unusual, odd things. I never know where I find inspiration. I think it's just in my head all the time. That's a question that usually artists get asked, and people always do ask me where I find inspiration. And it's just there. I think I find inspiration from everything, and maybe not one specific thing. I'm just thinking of things all the time, and they just kind of pop in my head. When people come to the studio, I have a hard time knowing what their reaction is sometimes, because sometimes people come in and they don't really even look at anything. And then other people think they love to come in to see everything. So I can never tell what people think when they come in here, because I think it's really unusual in here because I have so many odd things, and I've been here for 20 years and I have it so filled up that I probably can't move anywhere else. I don't know how I would move.
Celestial events in small hemispheres with specific latitudes and defined longitudes mark the universe and echo into the record. My name is Lucas Smiraldo, and I am a poet that really enjoys collaborations. Along with poetry, I do spoken word, I collaborate with musicians, so I love poetry spoken, and I also love to fuse that with other performing art forms. Like a vacuum in space-time, gone, banished from this town in a human race catastrophe, and their forebears spread like molten fragments into other towns. Well, we are at the Chinese Reconciliation Park, which you see behind me, which is a Ting, beautiful structure which represents Chinese architecture, as well as plaques and other materials that tell the story both visually and in word, and recognize and hopefully begin to write the history that was such a painful one for many Chinese Americans. The crime had been committed, but the file was buried in the archives, and one word was placed next to the title Chinese in the city's filing system, and that word was missing. Walking into what I believe is a sacred and spiritual space that's been sacred and made sacred and spiritual by a decision on the part of the leadership here and Chinese Americans that are connected with this community, to give people a chance to visit and to think about and contemplate what happened here. Well, a typical experience for me coming to visit the park is more about being available, opening myself up and just being present when I'm at the park. And the thing that this park does, I think, is to reference absence. Because the reason that Tacoma does not have the same kind of a thriving Chinese American business district and Chinese American community is because of a single collective horrendous act. Will the moon please step forward? Please state your name. Please declare your intention. Please tell us this story so that we hold it in our hearts as if we could light Ruston, could direct the sun to penetrate a 100-year darkness. Please tell us what you saw and how you felt. As once again, one people sought to eliminate the sight of another, and please tell us what to do. The rebuilding of community and of the Chinese American community, which is so present in Seattle and Portland and Vancouver, is a very long-term proposition. But this park, I think, is an initial step towards rebuilding and healing, and it gives people a chance to take a journey, I suppose. My choice about coming here today was to reinforce all of the work that a lot of people have been putting into revisiting the expulsion and in enforcing the idea of reconciliation, and bringing that to the awareness of a broader audience so that that particular healing thing will come forward. We must earn our way back into balance and welcome our brothers and sisters home. The moon may step down now. The rest is up to us.
My name is Aya Hashiguchi, and I consider myself a theatrical producer. About 4 years ago, my husband and I started Duke's Bay Productions, which is an independent theater company here in Tacoma. And our mission statement is to incorporate as many actors of color and of all ethnicities as we can on the stage. Our other mission is to promote independent theater here in Tacoma. My husband and I are the producers. My husband also directs. I'm also an actor. We only do 2 shows a year because we're both retired and we don't really want to be that busy. One of our shows that we do every spring is a long-running situation comedy for the stage. It's called Java Tacoma, and it takes place in a fictional coffee shop. It's sort of like the TV show Cheers, which took place in a bar, only our comedy takes place in a coffee shop. One of the roles in the show, the owner of the coffee shop, is played by me. And it's sort of one of the luxuries of being a theater producer is that you can write something for yourself, put it on stage, and voila, you're an actor. And I consider coffee to be a very Pacific Northwest sort of a thing, even though people all over the world drink coffee, but we in the Pacific Northwest are famous for our obsession with coffee. And so every morning I come to the Stadium Tully's to get my soy milk latte, and it occurred to me that when I go to Tully's, or any kind of coffee shop for that matter, I see people of all races, both genders, all ages. I mean, it really shows off the diversity of Tacoma. To showcase the diversity of actors here in Tacoma, what better way than to create a comedy that takes place in a coffee shop?
This started about it's almost 6 years ago now. We met each other through a class on making paper with natural materials. And then we started working together pretty much on a regular basis. And ever since then, when Lucia's not teaching, we're usually working together, making paper, learning to color paper, collecting things to make paper.
Right, and we also have done some collaborative art projects. What binds us together is our strong work ethic. So when we're really hard workers and we're really interested in doing experiments, we both love nature. But I think it's our work ethic and how we listen to each other and that makes it a good collaboration, and we kind of spur each other on. Sometimes a laborious process like making paper can be frustrating, and by having 2 of us, we can work through the challenges.
Yeah, the labor, it's very labor intensive, and we've developed ways of making things a little easier for us, but it really helps to split the work.
It's nice to have another person who kind of understands, like why we're artists, and we support each other through the frustrations of being sort of underappreciated by the society at large.
We're both introverts too.
Yeah.
So we don't talk a lot when we're working. We spend the time working, and then later we talk about it, what we're doing, and at lunch and like that. Part of what the paper making process is you kind of fall in love with the process. Yes, at the end you take it out of the dryer and you see all the pieces that you have, but you really have to kind of love the process or you won't be doing it for very long because there's a lot to it. Yeah.
My name was Phillip Harold Red Eagle. I'm named after my father and my grandfather and my great-grandfather. His name was Wambadi Duta, which translates Eagle Red, which got translated to Red Eagle. But when I was researching it at the Newberry in Chicago a number of years ago, I found out it was War Eagle. We don't use War Eagle, we use Red Eagle. I think my first art was probably in high school. I wrote a sonnet. And then I started taking pictures in Vietnam, and I picked up a 35mm Canon QL, which is a little rangefinder. And I carried it around with me. Other guys called me Picture Man. Picture Man, here's the Picture Man. And then I didn't have any real contact with art until UW, University of Washington, Seattle. I took a carving class with Marvin Oliver. And I got so interested in art that I started taking art classes. And I'd finished a degree in journalism already, so I shifted over to art. Well, as a political act, I started the Raven Chronicles, more from the journalist point of view, as a trained journalist. At the same time, I was processing Vietnam. And so I wrote a short story, which I published in the Seattle Arts Commission newsletter. I was honing my photography and I was honing my writing skills. And the original manuscript was short stories. Well, the publisher wouldn't publish short stories. So I had to sit down. It took me 4 years to rewrite it into 2 novellas, which are fiction. And the material came from my own experience and from the experience of this Dutch group that I was in. 92, I met my friend Tom Heidelbaugh, who got me interested in the cultural movement. He was dying of cancer, Tom Heidelbaugh, but he wanted to have this legacy of bringing culture back. So he would just feed me, and I would just empty, being filled up. Most Native people the bulk of them are urban, and we were raised urban in public school systems, my age. You know, my mother and father went to Indian school. So we were basically cut off from our culture, but it created an absence, because here we were walking around as Native people, not white, and not black, and not Asian, very little identity, very little cohesion. And so we missed being who we were supposedly were. So we wanted to, in 1978, of August 1978, Congress passed the Native American Freedom of Religion Act. It took a while to catch, but by the late 80s, early 90s, we're kind of reaching in. Some of the reservations had already been involved. They'd been secretive about their culture and hid it, so they had more access to it. So they adjusted fairly quickly. But a lot of the urban people like myself didn't adjust very well. We saw the absence, we felt the absence in our own selves. We stumbled upon the answer for our process. We wanted to have a process which was guided, basically, in a way, by philosophy or, tradition. But we didn't know how to do it. And then in '93, we discovered that we needed to reintroduce ourselves to ceremony. And everything would be ceremony. It would be a ceremonially and guided process of re-education into our cultures. And we started using the canoe as the vessel for that. Our first year in '95, we had 3 canoes and 50 people in our program. The next year we had nearly 300 people and 7 canoes. And in '98 we had 21 canoes and 1,000 people. And so now it's up to about 124, 25 canoes and 10,000 people. And it's spreading, because we have Maori people here, we have Japanese people, Filipinos, East Coast Indians are coming out and experiencing it. It's just amazing to watch the kids pick it up. And they're already speaking. They're being told, you know, Salish, taught the Salish language, or their own home languages, wherever they're from. And they're just jumping into it. They're just folding into it. It's not even an effort almost. It's just, you know, they're there and they're in canoes. When I was growing up, you know, we didn't do that, you know. We weren't taught the language because there were repercussions for doing that. There weren't any real repercussions, but there were for my mother and my father. And they were physically abused, you know, for that. And my dad's a fluent speaker, or was a fluent speaker. And he used to speak all the time. And then we'd go back to Montana and all the aunties would speak. So I learned how to pick, I could understand it, but I didn't speak it myself. The Dakota language, my father's people. My role with the canoe movement is having established this pattern with Tom back in the 90s and doing the ring ceremony, the copper ring ceremony. It's a contract ceremony for how we're going to conduct ourselves on a canoe journey. And it's very precise and covers a lot as well, the 10 rules. So I do that. I've done about several hundred ring ceremonies with one person to up to 400 people. And I've made about 8,000 rings. I've been doing it for 25 years now. Because we want to keep the balance in the process, so people don't get away with thinking that they're not rules. There are guidelines. You know, we're carrying on the influence of a lot of people in the 80s and 90s and who had all of these reculturation processes in emerging out of culture. And we had to put it back together and fold it back together again. And Tom was dying and it frustrated him so much that he wasn't going to be around. So we had that conversation. I said, you know, we're all going to die, and what we're doing is going to take 7 generations to do. We'll all be long gone by the time we reach that point at which we can say, yes, we have a culture, and we're bicultural. Just to get to bicultural, it's going to take 7 generations because of the presence of non-native people. And you're not going away. I don't think you are, unless you all go to space.
Paige Pettibon Seedsta, Salish Chud, Tol All Sala Sali. My name is Paige. I am Salish. I am from Tacoma.
Sam Pettibon Teesta, a Teed Bad, Tol All Sala Thali.
My dad's name is Sam Pettibon. He is from Tacoma.
Chris Hayward Pettibon Seesta, a Seed Skoy, Salish Seed Skoy, Tol All Sala Thali.
My mom's name is Chris Hayward Pettibon. She is Salish. She is from Tacoma. In Indian country, we try to explain our family and who we are because we're all related, and that gives the person that we talk to an understanding of where we come from, our heritage and our family, and that helps them gauge whether they're related to us and how they are related to us. The Tulshutsi language is really important to me. They say that the languages are going extinct. I like to think that they're sleeping and we just need to waken them up. I found that learning the language has helped me look at this land, the Puyallup land, in a different way. You know, I look at the birds and the trees, and I feel like I understand their story better now that I learned the language. I love to paint and draw portraits. I think that people gravitate towards a face and they feel a connection with a face. I try to incorporate my indigenous culture into the work that I do. I feel like we still look at classical, you know, European style as like formal art. There's a lot of fair-skinned portraits of males, you know, displayed in a certain way, and then also females displayed in another way, which is not necessarily the way we want to be represented as well. So I like to show femininity without being over-sexualized, and I like to have it be empowering for people, and I want it to have people think about like a different perspective and just be like, oh yeah, you know, I see myself in that, or you know, I can relate to this, or I never saw this before. You know, I want them to interpret it, you know, to really just think about like where they fit in. I did a print. It's a two-tailed mermaid, but she's indigenous, and so it's kind of a play with like the Starbucks two-tailed mermaid. I wanted her to be a water warrior. You know, I made up my own story of what a two-tailed mermaid could be for the Salish Sea. So yeah, it's just my interpretation. I like to put my heritage in it, and you know, as also being African American too, having my heritage be represented is really important. And also I get really inspired by my family as well, so I'll do portraits of my family, and of course my nieces and nephews love it, and they think I'm like a superhero artist. They introduce me as their artist aunt, which I really like. I do like to paint brown people just because I want us to be represented. I do pass as like a light-skinned person, and I do understand that I get away with some of those privileges that light-skinned people do, and I don't necessarily want to be the voice of anyone but myself and my ancestors and my, you know, immediate family, but I do recognize that brown folks don't always get represented the way that they want to. Although now I think that there is a lot of wonderful artists that are all shades of brown that are being acknowledged, which I really appreciate. Yeah, so we met at Tacoma Studio Tours here at Alma Mater, and that was a really good weekend for me. I noticed how captivating you were. I don't think people get to see wood carvers that often, and to see a carver in a space like this, I think people were just really captivated by you. I actually wanted to make my first paddle this year. We're starting a new canoe family. I've never paddled before. I've gone to Canoe Journey, but I've never paddled.
Are you going to do it with the Puyallup?
Puyallup Language Department.
Okay.
So our goal is to speak mostly Lushootseed on the whole trip.
Good.
So. Well, last year was the first time I actually did protocol with the Puyallup tribe. So protocol is where we're dancing and we're singing, and we give gifts to different tribes that host us and have us for the evening. And Puyallup hadn't hosted in about 20 years, was it? Do you know?
1998. Yeah.
Yeah.
20 years.
20
exactly.
years.
Yeah, I think we had 11 canoes back in 98.
And how many
Big
was
difference
it?
now is 124.
Yeah.
Yeah, just things have changed quite a bit from when we started. It was just around a campfire. We'd tell stories, and things began to grow, and we didn't have anything basically to start with, a few songs and ideas mostly. The young people, the kids just pick it up and they run with it, and so it's normal for them. But it was still pretty abnormal for us older people, because we always think it's against the law, or it's forbidden, like it used to be.
Yeah, my mentor told me to always keep your paddles wet because they once dried out and we want to keep them wet, so let's keep those traditions alive.
Yeah, I'm glad all of those traditions came back. And all those songs, we had a few of the older songs, but in the late 90s, a lot of the young men and women were creating new songs. And that was the beauty part of it, was the new songs, the young people. That's what it was supposed to be about for us. Not just bringing back the old, but creating a new way of life, a new way of living.
I definitely learned a lot last year. I made my first regalia. So I made a wool skirt and I wove it, and then I also made 2-seater vests.
Wow.
And you know, I'm studying and just trying to create something that is traditional and looks good to my abilities, and I was really happy with them. They looked really good. It felt really good to do something like that, you know, and to make it for someone and to have it be shared at Canoe Journey.
Amazing that all this stuff just came out of the woodwork. All of these, you know, they just suddenly appeared and we were doing them. And so it shows the amount that was hidden, you know, or people were doing way in the background, and all of a sudden they could bring it out to the front and do it.
Yeah.
So doing native art is really a big thing, you know, and especially doing it in public and bringing it out and using it. Everything we've made, we've used.
Yeah.
That's why, you know, I don't make wall-hanging paddles, even though some of them wind up that way.
Yeah.
I like them to go into the water. So I say, take it out of the water and rub it, you know, slosh it around in the water every once in a while and oil it up every year.
Yeah. There's kind of like this moral dilemma of like, who am I making art for? Who understands the value of the materials that I'm using, you know? So I always have that dilemma of like, you know, making stuff for, you know, someone who is going to appreciate and understand the story of where it came from.
Mm-hmm. Especially the story. Story is really important with everything.
It is, yeah.
And that's what this is all about. It's about story. That's what these beads are for. They're about story. That one bead, you should be able to pick it and be able to tell this very long story about how it was that year when you did it.
Now I see a great push of, you know, bringing these, like just awakening, not necessarily bringing them back, but awakening them and holding on to them and sharing them with our community members. Learning the language has really helped me see the value in that. I mean, it doesn't translate perfectly. Tulshutseed in English doesn't translate. Yeah. My mind thinks only in Tulshutseed sometimes because it doesn't translate. Yeah. And I think about the people that, you know, put these traditions before me, and now I have it, and how I need to strengthen my skills, and so I can pass those on.
Right. Yeah, that's good. I think it's, as we go through the generations of recovery, we're going to see more beauty coming out. More, you know, the young people are going to be more in that direction. They're going to be more in line with that than we were, because we were basically way outside of it. And getting it back it's been a dream, because I remember growing up here how empty it felt. Because here we were supposed to be Native American, or Indian, as we used to call us back then.
Yeah.
And not being Indian, just being a different person of color.
Yeah.
And now we're going to be able to say, yeah, I'm still you know, my grandfather was this person. And we talked about it coming back in 7 generations. At 7 generations, we would actually be bicultural. Would be Americans on one hand and natives on the other. We're nowhere near it now. You know, we're like urban Americans and, you know, and a little slice of Native America over here.
Yeah.
And I really want to go back. I really thought about those days of what it would be like, and wondering if we'd still be around, if human beings would still be around in when those 7 generations are complete. Yeah. Well, I'm glad I'm learning this from you. Very interesting to talk to a much younger person.
Yeah, and I want to thank you too, like, for taking your time and your words and being really thoughtful with what you say, and for all the work that you've done. you know? Like for someone like me, like I don't take that for granted, you know, that the people of your generation, you know, have really paved the way for people like me. I wanted to gift you this. I made that for you.
Oh, beautiful.
Thank you. It's a little pseudo bow.
You caught me. I don't have anything.
That's okay. You gave me your words.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Thank you.
My name is Priscilla Dobler, and I am a textile artist. My studio space is in the E9 brewery. I am upstairs and the brewery is downstairs. I'm in a little corner, but I have lots of natural light. It's a wonderful experience because there's constantly people here for me to talk to take breaks, but also the aromas. I'm really drawn to smell, and so the aroma of just things when they're, you know, hops or they have the fruits coming in, it just, when they're making ciders. So it's nice to be in an environment where it's just a lot of different activity going on and different people I get to meet constantly. My studio, I believe, has a very beautiful history and architectural design. I'm drawn to the ceilings and the roof, and I sometimes to take breaks, I just lay on the floor and look up and just stare at the walls or whatever it is. I mostly work with weaving and woodworking. I'm really interested in incorporating my Scottish and Mayan ancestry and culture of textile work into my own personal work. The relationship and parallels between my textile work and paintings all pertain to growing up in Merida, Yucatan. I would watch my grandmother weave hammocks as a child, and then at the same time hear these stories that would be told during that process, or my grandfather's storytelling. And they always encourage us to paint and always encourage us to work with art. And then we would go to the Mayan ruins and pyramids and then look at all this beautiful detail carvings and artwork. And for me, I've always felt that the textile history and painting history pertain to each other in storytelling and how oral story is kept alive. So as a textile artist transitioning to painting, it's always been very simple for me because painting is my background. That's where I studied in Florence, fresco painting. I've been doing watercolor painting with my grandmother since I was 9. It's always been easy for me to pick up a paintbrush and mix colors. And the transitioning is very simple because even when I'm picking cotton thread, I've noticed that there's a very big similarity between my sculptures and the colors I use, also within the paintings that I use as well. It's very bright and colorful. So I see myself here being able to create more paintings, and especially a lot of these paintings that tell a story that are in series of 3 to 5. So I do foresee myself staying here for quite some time and trying to produce as much work and taking advantage of the space while I can. But like everything, you know, as your work continues to grow and as the objects become bigger and bigger, it becomes an issue of how much space you really need and how much do you have access to. So I'm hoping to just be able to continue working here as much as I can and taking advantage of all the resources I have here before I start expanding into even larger paintings.
My name is Roni Chelben. I'm an artist in residence with the city of Tacoma, working on a community engagement piece around homelessness. The project I've been working here in Tacoma is called In Our Backyard. And that's a project that tries to think of Tacoma as a whole, as a community, as the backyard of everyone.
Hello, my name is Marquise Orlando Harvey. I'm originally from Cuba, but I'm here living.
The videos were called Conversations in Our Backyard and were basically conversations or mutual interviews between people with and without experience of homelessness that invited each other to their backyard to talk about homelessness.
I've always had a place to stay all the time. I've never been homeless before. But
as an artist in residence, my job was to try to immerse myself in the city of Tacoma. I'm also not from here, I don't live here, so it included me coming in here, learning as much as I could about the community, about policy issues, about how the community thinks of itself, and find ways to partner with different organizations and different elements and different people from city staff and other community members, and try to create a project that will address the issue of homelessness through art. I'm very passionate about using art or utilizing art as a mean for social change and for creating a dialogue and conversation.
To have more conversation on a neighborhood level, on a city level, to eliminate those stigmas and barriers that keep people really far from each other.
The performance was a mix of an enactment of a story called Room for Rent that deals with stereotypes and seeing the other as different than you, and try to kind of deal with more pluralistic way to look at reality and more acceptance. And personal content and original content of the participants, kind of expressing different issues or struggles from their own lives, experiencing homelessness and addictions and other challenges.
I grew up in a tough neighborhood of California, and I think homelessness is more tougher than anything.
One powerful aspect of art for social change, the way I see it, is, and that I felt through this project, is also having conversation as an integral part of it, and then to see how in every event, since the community that gathers in this event is different themes come up. It reflects the fact that the issues that come up are genuine and comes from the community. So if you think about it in a larger perspective of Tacoma as a community, how important it is that we would create art and projects with the community itself to actually see what comes up and what are the main issues that we're actually dealing with.
I wanted to ask you, Kevin, what do you think the causes for homelessness are?
I think art is also another basic thing about it, is like it's a way of expression, and usually it's also kind of a privilege to be able to create art financially and education-wise, and to think that you deserve and that you can express yourself just for the sake of expression. And I think shifting it a little bit and making it something that is available to diverse groups that are usually not given the opportunities is a political shift of itself. Part of the work is even justice, having people watching a performance made by, determined by, performed by people who are experiencing homelessness, that are determining the agenda of the day instead of the other way around like it is usually. So.